Welcome to Family Law Matters, the podcast presented by the Mealy Firm. Visit www.allfamilylaw.com or call 866-687-8561 to learn more. And now, here's your host.
Well, welcome back in. I am Bill King. I'm a managing attorney and partner with the Mealy Firm, and I am joined today by two amazing colleagues, and we are going to be talking about summer vacations and family law, complications, what to do, just issues that arise and things to think about. And so I'd like to introduce my two colleagues, and we'll jump right in.
I'm Emily McClarty. I am an associate attorney out of our Marietta and Forsyth offices.
I'm Dina Kismatulina. I'm managing attorney for the Midtown office, and it's great to be back.
Welcome in. With summer quickly approaching, in family law, we have to think about, okay, what are our families with children going to do? And so the first thing we think about is, okay, what are they thinking through in terms of what does the summer look like? What do vacations look like? What do exchanges look like? How does all of this take place? What are the impacts on me? Where can I go? What can I do? And so we have to think through a number of things, and that's whether a case is ongoing or a case is done. And so I want to talk just initially about summer vacation plans when you all are working with families and they're planning for the summer. What are some of the things that you see pop up while a case is ongoing? And then we'll talk about when a case is not ongoing.
I can jump in and start with that. It largely depends on the occupations of our clients, because there are some, professions that have summer free, like teachers, for example. And it also largely depends if both parents are working full time, or, and what's the parenting plan says about exclusive time during the summer or summer break that each parent can have. So, and that's where a lot of issues sometimes stemming from, because not always the parenting plans that the parties are having, and sometimes we inherit clients with the divorce decree or previous parenting plan already been done. So sometimes, summer requires extra planning because not things are smooth and well planned and thought through in a parenting plan. And one example of it, if each parent, for example, which is standard in Georgia, has 2 weeks of exclusive one-on-one time with the child, and usual provision as far as exchange is one of the parents' residence. But each parent travels with the child to another location, and sometimes they have to swap in between. How is that going to happen if maybe both parents decided to spend time in Florida? Certain things needs to be agreed upon. Another thing, and I think it also greatly affects summer planning nowadays, especially, and I lament for a second here, as a mother of two, you have to plan summer camps, I kid you not, in January or February, because all the good camps are gone. And then sometimes the time to choose weeks for camps and pay for it and put deposit down is way before parents' time to choose for the exclusive weeks for the summer. So majority of times, and it could vary from parenting plan to parenting plan, but usually if each parent has a certain number of weeks of vacation, the deadline to announce the choice is usually April 1st. But, majority of the time some good camps are already occupied. So we encourage our clients to think it through as much in advance as possible and communicate to the other party as much as possible. And this is always a key, and a smooth co-parenting can help people avoid a lot of wasting money, wasting time, and avoiding any possible crises in the middle of the summer when one party wants to file emergency hearing because something wasn't addressed, agreed upon, or thought through.
Yeah. So, getting to the basics, what is a parenting plan?
Oh, well, a parenting plan is a document that's created between you and your attorney or you and your spouse that essentially signifies and lays out exactly what parenting time is going to look like. So the custodial parent, or if there's joint physical custody, it's going to lay out specifically what days they're going to get, whether The non-custodial parent gets every other weekend, or you're on a week on, week off. Essentially, where is your child going to be day to day for 365 days a year? It's going to lay out holidays. It's going to lay out that summer visitation schedule. And it's going to lay out what happens in the event of a disagreement between you and your spouse.
All right. And so in the context of that summer visitation schedule, what are some examples of what you all see in parenting plans in terms of time on task with your child or with your children?
So as Dina alluded to, I usually put in their provisions on deadlines when you need to choose your weeks with your child. So usually April 1st, put in there whether time with your child is going to be consecutive or non-consecutive weeks, which essentially just means are you going to have 2 weeks that are not back-to-back or 1 2-week period. I usually put in their provisions on in-state, out-of-state travel, out-of-country travel, what that would look like. Provisions that you need to communicate with your child's other parent regarding passports, travel arrangements, where is the child going to be staying. So
itinerary.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot is encompassed just in that one small section.
Right.
Another interesting kind of observation in the provision that, that causes a lot of issue during the summer is whether or not holiday schedule supersede summer schedule, because you can plan out summer just swimmingly and then boom, 4th of July, and then maybe it's mom's week, but that's turned to have 4th of July, and then all that goes to kind of down down the hill because all the careful planning, but somehow mom is in Minnesota with her parents and with a child, yet father is in Georgia and he wants to have the child for his 24 hours on the 4th of July. So it's very important to have a provision. Is Father's Day override summertime with the child, and is 4th of July, and that's the most common. But we also, because we handle not just family law but international family law, we need to think in advance what other holidays our clients or maybe the other party celebrate that also fall on during the summertime. So we need to address it. So 4th of July, Father's Day is traditional American holidays, but our clients came from all over the world with different background, and they might celebrate some other holidays that we need to think through and make sure we address when we are creating parenting plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So in thinking through those holidays and the vacations, we are also thinking through along the lines of international family law, but also, here in the States, a lot of times parents don't live in the same city. They live far apart. When you're working through exchanges and what those look like during the summer, what are you advising the clients? What are you talking to the clients about to think through? Because you've got to think through, one, are they going to drive? Are they going to fly? And, even are they going to take a train? And so you're thinking through what are those specifics that you have to discuss and think through. And so when you're talking about that, what are some things that you're thinking about in terms of those exchanges?
So I think the first thing I look at is what does the relationship between you and your co-parent look like? Because inevitably that is going to affect whether or not we need to be very descriptive as to where pickup and drop-off will take place, or whether we can put it in there, but knowing that the two of you are going to be able to work through and figure it out on a rotating schedule. But when it comes to parents that are across state lines or across larger city lines, the first thing I advise clients to do is to talk to the co-parent and figure out if there's some kind of middle ground where you can meet, or if one parent wants to drop off, the other will pick up. That way, everyone's kind of taken half the load. No one is burdened with having to, not that children are a burden, but no one's, having to take on that full responsibility of travel. And then the other thing is the cost of that travel and who's going to pay for that. So if your child support does not specifically allocate a travel deviation, do you and your co-parent need to discuss, well, I'll buy the train ticket there, you buy it on the way back, I'll just send you the bill, you give me some reimbursement. So there's a lot to look at and go into, but communication is really going to set the initial boundary for that.
What a great comment, Emily. And the first thing the judges will ask you if you go to court, if you're unable to reach some kind of agreement, the first thing the judge will ask, did you try to communicate? Did you try to agree? Did you try to be reasonable? And that's the key here, because judges do not want to resolve, kind of issues on a smaller scale, where the pick-up and drop-off should be, or where the parents should meet. The expectation is both parties reasonably try to reach an agreement, and if somebody abusing his or her power, that's when we have an issue. Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. And so in thinking through that, these kind of minor things are things to think through in terms of negotiating points, right? So in thinking through, okay, who's going to be responsible for the cost? Who's going to be responsible for pickup and drop off? Where is that going to be? The other thing I was thinking through is, the age of children. How young are they? How old are they? Are they able to get on a plane by themselves? Is somebody going to have to escort them to the gate? Is somebody going to have to fly with them to that location? So now are you buying 2 tickets? Who's responsible for that cost? And that can at times play into child support as well. And we can talk about that in a little bit. I really want to focus on the custody aspect, but that also plays into, child support arguments in terms of deviations, travel deviations. But those are great negotiating points and things to think through when you are trying to resolve a case. Like, what are the parties' most important things when they're thinking through those?
Another great kind of issue to discuss and mentioned during today's podcast, I think, especially considering that we deal a lot not with just family law in Georgia, but with international family law, is that will there be any overseas travel for the minor child? Majority of the parenting plan in the state of Georgia has a provision that if the child is removed from the state of Georgia, for any reason at all, the other parent has a right to know where the child is going, for how long, maybe copy of, itinerary, maybe, emergency address and phone number where the child could be reached, maybe hotel the child is staying at. And this is something that you can include in the parenting plan, and this is something to me, makes sense and which would give both parties peace of mind. So we never know, how things gonna go, and even if your other co-parent has the bestest intentions. Nowadays, the world is crazy. Things could happen, earthquakes, fires, things happening.
Hurricanes, tornadoes.
Exactly, absolutely.
Floods.
Yes, and it's important to know where is my child, how can I find the child, and what could be done if something, strikes, if some emergency will pop up. And another issue that we often have to get involved with is that majority of times, and it also depends on the provision of the parenting plan, and it could vary, which parent holds the child's passport. And majority of times, if some kind of international travel is involved, for certain countries, maybe international visas need to be received prior to the trip, which normally happens way prior. And this is all need to be planned and addressed. For example, maybe if dad is a primary custodian and holds the child's and maybe international passports or U.S. passports, and the other side requested to obtain, a foreign country visa, and maybe there is no specific stipulation about that, but the expectation is parties have to co-parent and facilitate the same, and then it largely depends, has the other party have a right to travel to another country with a child? In sometimes, we are called upon to assess that issue and strategically approach it, because we also handle child abduction cases through Hague Convention, and sometimes, it is maybe advisable to kind of try to think ahead and see what countries the child cannot be taking, because there is no guarantee the child will be returned. Largely it depends what is the level of cooperation or hostility between the parents. And, Bill has a lot of stories about Hague Convention cases and international trips that are planned as, visiting grandma or seeing Eiffel Tower, and then the child is never returned. So that's something to be considered and discuss. And if it discussed and raised in advance, there is so many different options to is fear, to put plans in place, to put some alternative ways to address it, including stipulation as far as it relates to international travel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, along the international travel lines, we have a lot of stories, a lot of horror stories about parents traveling for quote-unquote vacation and then staying and not returning the child or the children. But planning in advance and thinking through in advance things that you can do, we will often include requirements in parenting plans that you have to have what's called a mirror order in the country that you're traveling to, which is an order entered into that country, which reflects what's in the parenting plan here in Georgia, here in the U.S. So that way, if the child is kept in that country, then you can go there and enforce that order immediately and get the child back. The other option is international travel agreements. So we have developed an international travel agreement that mirrors the Hague Convention on the civil aspects of international child abduction, in the sense that you lay out where's the child's home country, their habitual residence is the term of art. You lay out or addressing the defenses of the Hague Convention. For instance, there's no grave risk of the child living in the United States. There's no threat of harm to the child, things like that. And so there are a number of things related to the international travel that you can include as requirements in that parenting plan to be proactive, to ease your concerns about your children returning, your child returning, and making sure that worst case scenario doesn't happen.
Well, and similar to that, it's a big country we live in. There's got 50 states in it. A lot of times I include provisions on what happens when one parent decides they want to move to a different state. They want to move more than 50 miles, because if you're moving from Dahlonega, Georgia to Savannah, that's going to have a huge impact just as much as leaving the state.
I mean, if you're moving from Douglas County to Gwinnett County, that's a big move too across Atlanta. So I agree.
And a lot of times what I hear is, well, my co-parent has primary custody. They're telling me they're moving and taking the child. Am I stuck here now? And not necessarily. I mean, courts look at the best interest of the child. So there's a lot to look into on a case-by-case basis when it comes to local relocations. Right,
and those relocations can often prompt a modification. I mean, just that change in address, just that move could be, a change that merits revisiting the parenting plan to see what happens so that a parent doesn't lose out on time. And tying it into summer, the standard provisions are usually 2 weeks. Parents will get 2 weeks during the summer, and that's to give them the opportunity to go on those vacations. But because it is such a substantial time off of school, a lot of times if you've got parents who are across the state or out of state or international, judges will utilize that extended time to make up for time throughout the year so that parent isn't disadvantaged in terms of time on task with their children to continue to develop that relationship and have that relationship with their children. So thinking through that, when you have that, you're seeing one parent's going to have a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and those provisions, there does creep in some concern. And we've seen where one parent will have the child for 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden, and that may be just across state lines, all of a sudden they're saying, well, little Johnny doesn't want to come back. He wants to stay here. He's made some friends here. What are some issues? So first, provisions that you all have seen, but what are some issues that you've all seen creep in those situations?
Well, one thing I've seen creep in is when a child goes for an extended length of time and allegations of some kind of abuse come up. And now we have a situation where the child's made a claim of abuse. They're with the other parent. The other parent is supposed to return the child so they can start school. But you have this situation where you don't have the heart really to return a child to that situation. So now you're acting on an emergency modification matter. That's the biggest thing I've seen creep in.
Yeah. So and I appreciate that you said emergency modification matter. One of the terms that we often hear or discuss is self-help. And what does that look like? And is that advisable? And I think for the most part, it is not. I mean, there are very rare circumstances where you discuss self-help in terms of thinking through what am I going to do in those situations.
One of the important considerations is a lot of people don't know that, but per statute in the state of Georgia, if you will engage in self-help and refuse to return the child and will not return the child to the person who's entitled to custody, and try to do modification, while doing that, your petition for modification will be denied. So if you essentially retaining the child and the child's supposed to be with the other parent, you cannot file to modify. However, there is a lot of way around that provision, and self-help is not always advisable. And we understand there are some extreme situations when maybe child made a disclosure of sexual abuse, maybe when there was some evidence of neglect disclosed. So there is always a way around it. And as we mentioned, there is there are several ways to do it, but it's always advisable to discuss it with your attorney, because you might be morally correct. You might be doing what's good for the child, but it's against the law, and then all the good intentions are going down the drain, and you're not helping your child. You're wasting money, you're wasting time, and you raise the level of conflict, and you might end up with paying attorney's fee for the other side just because it wasn't strategically thought through, and you kind of acted just in order, you wanted to help your child, and you did the best you could. In majority of times, it's not good enough. So my advice is always seeking advice from an attorney. We can absolutely help you. And there are much smarter ways to resolve the issue, from getting maybe social services involved, maybe filing emergency, maybe returning the child and immediately seeking emergency hearing on the issue of custody. And majority of the judges in Metro Atlanta are usually responsive, as long as there are some evidence of maybe neglect or abandonment or abuse submitted. So I also wanted to touch on another issue, and it's close to my heart as a mother of two very, very, athletically involved children. I am a mother of one child who does rowing, and another child who does ice hockey. I know, Bill's kids, at least
doing soccer.
Yes, soccer. Mm-hmm. And this is another very important consideration to think about during the summer, because, is it important for your children? Is the sport important for your children? Are they involved in some kind of extracurricular activities that not only involve some kind of, tryout week prior to school being starting prior to school resuming, but also maybe some activities that require some summer involvement, for example, mandatory training camp of some sort, or maybe some kind of regattas or competition that take place during the summer. And what is the level, how important it is for the child to attend those activities, because you're also kind of trying to balance, and you want to make sure that your child is spending time with the other parent. And it's all very important, but it's very, very good to have a conversation early and try to balance all of it. Maybe the child will attend training camp, but, maybe father will come and spend time in the evenings. What does the child want? What could the family afford? What would be the best for the child?
So, all right. Any last thoughts for the listeners on thinking through vacations, summer vacations? You just talked a lot about camps with some great points, but just any last thoughts for the listeners?
Maybe try to co-parent, have conversations as early as possible, and keep things in writing.
Get to know what your children like to do so that you can prepare them for summer and have a plan for summer that is not them sitting at home with absolutely nothing to do, and now you're trying to come up with a day-to-day schedule of what am I going to do with my kid.
Yeah,
great advice.
Absolutely.
And hide the Nintendo or PlayStation half a day.
The iPads, the cell phones. Throw those away and let's go outside and have some fun. For me, one of the things that I would say is, when you and the other parent are still together, whether married or not, the best laid plans, right? They still fall apart. So now throw in the wrench of you all are not together and you're trying to co-parent separately. the best laid plans, that even more complications can arise. So my last thought is the earlier, the better. The sooner you can start making these plans, the better prepared you'll be to address any issues that arise. And thinking through, I want to make sure that I've got something set up for my kids so they're not sitting around all summer. I want to make sure that everything's paid for so nothing falls through at the end, or we didn't save that space for them in that camp. And so the earlier the better. Just start planning. Don't wait till the last minute. Work through those issues early so that you can make sure that your kids are having a great summer and living their best life despite, your imperfection. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We all have our imperfections, but don't let those things stand in the way of giving your kids a happy life. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today here on our podcast, and we look forward to talking to you soon. And please check us out at www.allfamilylaw.com if you'd like to learn more.